we'll start with your first dark horse, which is your 7.5 win threshold. Who is it?
Yeah, I actually considered Baylor, but then I picked 2 Southern teams in the locks, and I don't want to pick a third Southern team.
You don't want to make me mad.
Yeah, I do have another Southern team I will talk about.
A little bit of this.
But,
keep Doug's swords down.
Yeah, that's right. My 7.5 win team is Utah. We've talked a lot about Utah, like what's going on there. I really think like this offense is going to pop.
Okay,
with all the offensive line starters back and like some decent depth, I think too. Devin Dampier, quarterback, Wayshawn Parker, running back. Some of the stuff you read about Utah in the spring, I continue to find Nate Johnson very interesting as like a dual threat quarterback wrinkle you can throw in the backfield with Devin Dampier. He was at Utah. He transferred to Vanderbilt and he came back to Utah. There's just like something there that I think could be pretty exciting and different for what Utah is going to be. I don't know if they're going to be able to throw the ball all that much, but or all that consistently. But I also don't know maybe if they have to get to the playoff, if they can be among the best rushing offenses, which by the way, New Mexico was last year with Jason Beck as its OC and Devin Dampier as its quarterback. They were number 2 in the country in rushing yards per game, number 1 by yards per carry. And I think like the pieces they're working with now are better than what they were working with at New Mexico. Also, the level of play is more difficult. I understand that, but
yeah,
I think there's something there with the run game. I'm maybe I should be more worried about the defensive pieces they have to replace than I am currently. The last time I was looking through FEI, the last time Utah didn't have a top 25 defense was 2017, and that year they were 28th. Like, so it was like they landed just outside of that. So you have to go back a long ways to find the last time I think Utah didn't have at least like a serviceable defense. And I think they'll be better than that. The one thing that spooks me, and this is hard with the Big 12, I think you can talk with too much certainty about the Big 12 and like who's a contender, what are the tough games, etc.
Yeah,
like it was an SP plus, like the preseason rankings. There are 8 Big 12 teams ranked between 19 and 36. So like the league is a bit of a jumbled mess. But if you look at the FanDuel odds currently of the 6 teams with the highest odds to win the Big 12, Utah plays all 6. So it could end up being a tough schedule. But I didn't want to get bogged down too much in that, and I wanted to lean more into I think the offense will bounce back, perhaps be quite good. And there's a baseline of success for the defense there that I think is bankable, that Utah could kind of get back to what it's been the last couple of years and make a run at getting into the playoff out of the Big 12.
So we talked about the Indiana threshold at 5.5 wins, but there's also the Indiana model. And that is an interesting conversation here because you can spin schedule stuff however you want to spin it. If you play some good teams, it's like, well, they have an opportunity. When we upset one of these highly ranked teams and all of a sudden you're off to the races. But the Indiana model is
don't play any of them.
They can't. The SEC can't take away Indiana's playoff spot from last year, can they?
No.
Can they? No, they're still in.
We're good.
They'll always be in.
They'll always be in.
They can't vacate Indiana's playoff appearance if I say their schedule was kind of easy. And they got their doors blown off by the one good team they played. Also, hey, guess what? Michigan beat Ohio State and Alabama, and Indiana found a way to beat them on a day when it looked like maybe it was going to get away from them. So that actually was a very good win. But so some of this is, I guess it is, I think based on that, being on the lookout for who has an easy schedule is also a pretty good way to do this. I don't know if we're going to, if either of us are going to find a team quite like that. But it's what did Indiana do? They won 11 winnable games because the defending national champion Michigan Wolverines weren't quite themselves. And then they went and lost to Ohio State and it didn't matter. They got in.
I think you could, because one of the teams that's on the 7.5 win line, I just didn't pick them because we kind of talked about them already, and we, including I put them in the playoff when we did our playoff picks, is BYU. Yeah, I think you can do that exercise with BYU. I don't, if you are to use purely betting odds as your guide, which again maybe you shouldn't with the Big 12. BYU's schedule does not look all that daunting, but
okay,
I didn't pick them.
All right, so my 7.5 win threshold dark horse is Washington. And we had a good little conversation about Washington already. This is not the Indiana model because Washington has what I think are 4 show me games. But the thing is, Last year, they were good at home, including beating Michigan, and they were bad on the road. They won their games at home and they lost their games on the road. They get Ohio State at home. They get Illinois at home, and they get Oregon at home the last weekend of the year. And then they are at Michigan. They don't, they have the Apple Cup, but they really, they don't have a non-conference game they should lose. Maryland, Rutgers, Wisconsin, Purdue, UCLA, like very much there. And so now this is the opportunity side of things. Offensive line better. Damon Williams, first-year starter, who was a wrinkle guy last year. Like, could he be this year's J.J. McCarthy? Right? Mm-hmm. Like, maybe. Jonah Coleman, real dude. Denzel Boston, my favorite receiver. Maybe not doing everything in the spring, but going to be a guy. And then Ryan Walters as the new defensive coordinator, who in all of our Tom Allen, Jim Knowles, Matt Patricia talk, like that, I think was a really good hire by Washington. That Ryan Walters, again, we've talked about it. Purdue actually had a couple players last year. They probably should have been better than 1-11. They shouldn't have lost as many games by 60 as they did. Good defensive coordinator. Does anybody doubt that? That guy knows how to dial it up. He just probably wasn't ready, as it turned out, in that spot to be a head coach. But I think he's going to be good for the Washington defense.
I definitely could be. I think we need to continue to monitor because he wants to play a ton of man, right? And like when he was at Illinois, he could. There was a couple NFL dudes in that secondary. Does he have the guy? And like he tried to do it at Purdue, and he didn't have the guys to do it. So does he have the guys to do it at Washington? But I think he might at corner because they have Ephesians Priceock and they got Dakario Davis out of the portal from Arizona. So they very well might be able to do it this year and do it well.
So for this to happen, they're going to have to beat one of Ohio State, Michigan, or Oregon. But if they're 10-2 with wins over Michigan and Illinois, and their losses are to Ohio State and Oregon, depending how everything else in the race shakes down, or if somehow they're 10-2, but one of the wins is over an Ohio State or Oregon team that's making the playoff, that is quite a chip to play. So I don't know. Am I predicting that? But I know, but I like a lot of their pieces, and they had a goofy year last year. They had some bad luck on the road. I think the travel stuff was an adjustment. I think the travel stuff mattered last year. It was kind of great debate going into it. How much does it? I think it did matter. And I think the West Coast teams were affected by it. And the record would bear it out. And also it's not only that, it's well, I don't know, they had to go play some good teams. But I think they'll all be a little better at dealing with that this year. So Washington, who was so good at home, also should be better on the road. And if they get their offensive line figured out, I just like it. You with me at all? Husky Nation?
I think I can get there with you. I actually I certainly wouldn't pick a Washington upset over Ohio State now, nor do I anticipate picking it when we get to September and the time comes. But I will acknowledge, and I think people should acknowledge, that could be a potentially tricky trip for Ohio State. To go on the road in September with a young quarterback, whoever it is, reworked offensive line a little bit. It's a really tough place to play. I think Ohio State learned just how hard Autzen Stadium is to play in last year, and I think they're going to find that Husky Stadium has similar things going on there, right? So, tricky opportunity for Washington. That I think maybe you should just kind of keep in the back of your mind a little bit.
Opportunity pieces, and a coach who I think has a chance to make a jump in year 2. So, all right, who is your 6.5 win threshold dark horse?
The Florida Gators.
Who do they have?
So if we can go back to the South, it's just betting a little DJ Lagway magic. It's interesting to me, right? Because last year Florida's win total was low, and everyone's like, "Oh, Billy Napier's on his way out. How can Florida possibly navigate this schedule?" And then you look at the games that people offered up as the examples of how hard it's going to be, and it's they lost to Tennessee in overtime in a game where Lagway didn't start, but he played.
Yep.
I'm telling you, they would have beat Georgia if he didn't get hurt.
100%.
They would have beat Georgia last year if he didn't get hurt.
I'm not sure that Kirby Smart would dispute that.
And then they beat LSU and Ole Miss with Lagway starting, and it's those were the games. How do you get through this juggernaut of a schedule? It's because you got DJ Lagway. He went 6-1 as a starter, and now I see some of the same stuff about Florida's schedule this year. Well, they got DJ Lag, assuming he's healthy, right? I guess like he's
Yeah.
not throwing, as we said on the show yesterday. Like maybe they get to September and it's like, well, our quarterback doesn't have a functioning arm. It's like, okay, well, I guess I'll rethink what Florida's doing. But at the moment, I
Yeah.
will assume that DJ Lagway can play and throw the football this year, and I'll take Florida as a dark horse to get to the playoff out of the SEC, because the kid showed as a true freshman that he has some stuff to win some games that maybe they shouldn't win, and he'll be better this year. I think the roster around him is actually not terrible. And I don't think anyone in the SEC is like so runaway good from everybody else in the conference that Florida couldn't like steal a couple wins that get it to 10-2 for some reason. And then there it is in the playoff at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's another show. Florida teams whose quarterbacks have functioning arms. Like that might not be a super long show for us.
They play at LSU, at Miami, Texas, at A&M, Georgia, in Jacksonville, at Ole Miss, Tennessee, Florida State. So like it's another potentially very tough schedule, but I don't know. Florida have the best QB in all those games that I just listed.
Right. So like I don't know, like we want to do like I don't know, you want to do like a little Johnny Manziel stuff here? Texas A&M was 7-6 in 2011, and then they went 11-2 with Johnny Manziel. Like, and they had Mike Evans too, but like that really helped. But
Florida will have Eugene Wilson.
What's that?
Florida will have Eugene Wilson, good receiver, didn't play a bunch last year.
So man, but it's like you can like their Magic players can do stuff. So college football's Magic players. I like it. And it's one of those like you would be joined by very many people on like to pick a 6.5 win team.
Yeah, I think so.
But that doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah.
So like you're allowed to ride with winning with DJ Blackwood. Okay. This is gonna please Christopher P because I am taking Minnesota. So Minnesota is at the 6.5 win threshold. I have talked about them a lot, and I think I was like trying to do this. If I apologize if I wasn't like listening to what you were saying. Are there times on the show when you're not listening to what I'm saying? Have ever happened?
Huh?
Do you ever? That's like a family story. I'm sure it's happened to 1,000 people, but my grandma was in the hospital one time and they were like, do you have any hearing issues? And she said, what? And it's like, so I was like in my head, I was doing like the Tom Rinaldi intro to the Minnesota feature in November about how Minnesota is doing this, why Minnesota is 8-1 or whatever. And I just feel like people know this by now. They're like hiding in plain sight. And it's just like, they've always maybe been better than you thought they were. And they've done this at times before. And this actually, they got 2, but this is the Indiana path. I don't know if they'd get it at 10-2. They're at Ohio State and they're at Oregon. Otherwise, their toughest non-conference game is Cal, Rutgers, Purdue, Nebraska, Iowa, Michigan State, Northwestern, Wisconsin. Like they are staring down the barrel of 10 wins. And then it's a question of if they go 10-2 with losses to Ohio State and Oregon, are they in? Indiana probably would not have been in because the second loss wouldn't have been as good. But again, if they're 2 losses, that's a tough resume. And I don't want to spend 75 minutes debating that Minnesota resume, but we can spend 14 seconds on it. 10-2 Minnesota with their 2 losses on the road to playoff teams. How much of a contender do you think they are?
I think they're in it. And they would receive like no benefit of the doubt is the problem, right?
Yes.
They don't, as much as it's not supposed to be about what you've done in your past. It's hard for that not to creep in. I think when you're trying to decide if teams on the bubble should get in, and Minnesota obviously wouldn't have that, but I think they would be taken seriously. I think you'd have to take them seriously.
And Christopher makes a good point. It's like how they lose would matter. If they're tied entering the fourth quarter at Ohio State and then they lose by 10, or if, they outplay Oregon and Oregon like gets a pick 6 and returns a punt for a touchdown, like the way Boise State lost to Oregon last year, like that would matter. So like not all 10-2s are created equal. Then of course it's going to matter like, well, who else is 10-2 and who lost, But the other 10 are really winnable, and they have Darius Taylor, and they have Drake Lindsay as a young quarterback that I love to talk about, and they have Coy Parrish at safety, and they are a team that they develop talent, don't they? Like
They do. I actually think they're a good developmental program. And they also, I don't know that we've discussed this. They added AJ Turner, running back from Marshall, out of the transfer portal, who like had 100 something carries and averaged like 8.5 yards per carry at Marshall last year.
Yep.
Like AJ Turner and Darius Taylor together, I find very interesting.
I think they've talked about that, right? About like a little bit of a 1-2 punch there, and then they'll have Zach Pyron as a wrinkle quarterback, like the Georgia Tech. Like and I do think it's one of the.
But getting Turner
like,
too allows you, because we saw Taylor play receiver a lot last year. Like getting Turner allows you to put them on the field together, and they can put Turner in the backfield and put Turner in the backfield, Darius Taylor in the slot, and let them cook.
And it's also one of those things where it's like, oh, what happened? Like everybody's looking for tackles. Well, what did Minnesota have a tackle last year? It's like, well, they had a guy who's going to be like a second-round NFL draft pick in Ariante Ursary, and they're going to have a guy who transferred to Ohio State to be a 3-year starter at Ohio State. And it's like, wow, they lost a lot. But also that tells me, like, I don't know, I kind of trust them to figure it out. And they had offensive lines issues early last year. They weren't super pleased with it. But like, I think this is now the kind of program hiding in plain sight where it's like, oh man, Minnesota lost some people. It's like Minnesota figures it out. Don't you think? I think you need to have some faith in like their developmental program now. Like whatever Michigan State was under Mark D'Antonio. We've seen it with various programs. Like they'll figure it out. Maybe what Utah has been with Kyle Whittingham to some degree. Like trust their ability to find the guys they need to find to do what they need to do. Their defensive coordinator just left to go to Miami because they developed coaches.
I don't think like
God, they're good.
The areas,
everybody.
The areas where Minnesota is probably like a little more susceptible to ups and downs is like in the passing game, right? Like, is the quarterback always going to be right? The receiver's always going to be right. I more often than not probably trust them to get the offensive line of the run game going, and that can get you pretty far when you have Darius Taylor and AJ Turner. So, yeah, I think they're there. Like people aren't paying attention to them. To your point, they're hiding in plain sight. I don't think we view them that way. I think we view them as a potential like likely upstart this year.
Yeah,
like when they're sitting at 8 wins in November, and I was like, huh, Minnesota. Just remember where you heard it first.
And I don't know, this came across my timeline. I don't know if you heard, some show said that they have the most important defensive player in Northern college football. I don't know if you heard that.
They do.
Coy Parich, I think is his name. Is that how you say it?
Huh?
That's us, Coy Parich. And yeah, I love when this happens. Mitchell's in here in the chat, talking Gophers in March. It's actually April. Talking Gophers in April. That's what we're doing here.
That's right.
So this is Vasanth, who was awesome on the show yesterday. Minnesota is also in the same SP plus vicinity as Southern Dark Horse favorites Baylor and Texas Tech. Yeah, cram your Texas Tech for real. I love the sisters because did you like the sister school show we did last year? Like we're already like South Carolina is Kansas State, Texas Tech is Minnesota. I can get into that again. You want to do that?
But Minnesota is like the anti-Texas Tech. Texas Tech is buying a roster and.
Yeah. Oh, let's do that. Anti-schools, who we are not. All right. This is the biggest dark horses. This is 5.5 wins or fewer. There are only 22 teams of the Power 68 to choose from. Who did you choose?
Yeah, I don't feel great about this. Please don't take this one to the bank necessarily.
Why is this banner up here?
Yeah, I picked West Virginia. In the spirit of Indiana and Kurt Cignetti, I picked West Virginia. 31 transfers coming in for West Virginia this year, the most in the FBS. The major difference is that Kurt Cignetti like brought all of his good players from James Madison with him to Indiana. Rich Rodriguez has only brought 5 transfers from Jacksonville State, and only one of them was a first team all conference player. So it's like not the same thing. And I actually like this is like I'm assuming Nico Marchiol is going to be the quarterback, but I've also said like it's always tough. Like, is it actually a competition? Like, we're not on the ground there.
Yeah,
it's hard to kind of sift through sometimes. But like, they got Jalen Henderson from Texas A&M and Max Brown from Charlotte as transfers who were like dual threat guys. So like, is it possible that Rich Rod wants to lean more toward their running ability? I think Nico Marchiol clears both of them significantly as a passer. How much would that matter? I think Nico Marchiol is probably still the starter. But it's like if Nico Marchiol is good and takes a step, and Jaheim White has 800 carries for 4,000 yards this year, like maybe West Virginia can find its way through the Big 12 as a team that nobody saw coming, similar to Indiana last year.
And by the way, we're looking for the next Indiana. Where did Kurt Cignetti, Indiana coach, play his college ball?
That's right, Morgantown.
If we ask Kurt Cignetti, which would be a lovely thing to ask Kurt Cignetti, who do you think could be this year's Indiana? He better say the Mountaineers.
Mountaineers, yeah.
Don't you think we could do 5 minutes with Kurt Cignetti trying to compare Rich Rod in year one to what he did in year one?
He's got a whole book on the West Virginia roster. It's like, I wasn't going to take the job, but I did my research. Like, here's what I would have done. Yeah. Yes, I think you would. By the way, Rich Rod turned Jacksonville State quickly when he got there. They were 5-6 when he got there. They were 9-2 in his first year. And then when they moved up to FBS, they went 9-4 in their first year. Now they have no offensive linemen at West Virginia, which could be a problem. But aside from that,
has that ever stopped anybody before? Also, could West Virginia get a frickin' break? Like,
for real, yeah.
With the way last year unfolded and what would happen with the basketball team and Darren DeVries leaving for Indiana after a year and taking his kid with him, like, I think it's time for Karma to sing Country Roads, right? Like, let's go. Come on, Karma. Come on. Throw him a bone. West Virginia deserves it. All right, my dark horse is Syracuse.
I wish I could have placed a bet on you picking Syracuse.
Yeah,
you love Fran Brown.
Oh my God! So here's the thing I was thinking about, like where we were a year ago, even going into the season. I am a simple person. Would it be KOT and sacrilege to offer up Mike Gundy and the Cowboys as the 5.5 win team? Christopher P. Let me see how to block Christopher P. Here is that. Would it be KOT and sacrilege? You knew the answer to that question, Christopher P., before you asked it. This is an Alan Bowman coming back for year 9. Do you know? Is he the quarterback at Oklahoma State this year? No. Is it a Gundy? Is it like Danger Gundy? Like, who would be?
These are my sons, Walker and Texas Ranger. Yeah, no, no idea who the Garrett Rangel is. He still there? He played a little bit last year.
Okay. Good luck to Oklahoma State. We're never going to say their name again in between now and December. So a year ago, like even going into the season, like we weren't, certainly at this time last year, but we weren't sure who the BYU quarterback was going to be. And when we do our shows, and we did a show a couple weeks ago about like, okay, whose quarterback situations are set and whose quarterback situations are a little uncertain. In 2024, absolutely, we would have said BYU is an uncertain quarterback situation. It's Gary Bohannon versus Jake Retzlaff. Retzlaff has been around, but yet they brought in Bohannon as a transfer. Like, we don't know how that's going to go.
We ranked our quarterback situations like last offseason. I'm pretty sure we had BYU last.
How'd that go?
Not great.
Jake Retzlaff, Aaron Roderick, Kalani Sitake telling us to cram it. How'd that go? A year ago, SMU, Preston Stone, maybe some Kevin Jennings. They might share. What happened? Kevin Jennings took over in like week 3 and led SMU to the playoff. So I'm looking for I was a little bit on alert for like the quarterback situation where at the moment you might be like, I don't know. And that would help drive down a win total. And then it's like, oh yeah, no, Ricky Collins was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
He was like a top 12 quarterback recruit when he went to LSU. He couldn't get on the field because Jaden Daniels and Garrett Nussmeier were there. So he transferred to Syracuse and was as good as Kyle McCord. So that's where I am. So I'm as much as you think this is a Fran Brown swing, it really is like upside quarterback. This happens where a team goes from uncertain quarterback to bang, he's our guy in a nanosecond. And I think Syracuse could be that team this year.
I certainly buy it more than West Virginia. I pick West Virginia because you pick Syracuse. I could see it because they have Yassine Willis is back at running back, right? Freshman last year, like he's going to be number 1 back this year. Like a lot of teams, you got to figure out.
Trevor Pena's back, right?
Yeah. So like, there's stuff there. They got a lot of holes to fill O-line and defense, but it's hard not to buy into the idea of Fran Brown exceeding expectations most years, and these expectations are pretty low. So like, if the win total's 5.5 and they go 9-3, I might bet on that. It's just hard to like playoff. Although, what's the ACC? So I don't know. Maybe they can.
Yeah.
I'm not going to write them off.
John's making a good suggestion. Pitt, right? He's surprised we didn't mention Pitt. with the way Eli Holstein started last year. He called him September Heisman winner Eli Holstein. Des Reed is back at Pitt. We've talked about, we think Pitt shored up its offensive line a little bit. Their linebackers are great. You get year 2 of Cade Bell running the offense, and maybe there's a little more of a melding of Pat Narduzzi and Cade Bell in a way that like it's more sustainable, so they don't win their first 7 and lose their last 6. So like that's a good candidate. It's like, but this is the game we want to play. And I think it's fun, especially when we pick Northern teams, and good job by you to limit your Southern exposure here. But like, it's nice, right? Like to think, and we understand what it is, but we're talking about a situation where last year, 3 teams that in the preseason had a win total of 7.5 or fewer made the playoff. So 3 dark horses made it last year. So we each picked 3 dark horses. So it can sound crazy right now, but is it?
It happened. And I'm actually like, because we always, not we always, but like there was a lot of discussion about like, oh, 12-team college football playoff. Who cares? Like it's always going to be the same teams. You're not going to have a Cinderella kind of thing. And I guess like maybe college football versions of Cinderella is like the teams that just make it like from out of nowhere, maybe not go on a run necessarily. So like that was a little eye-opening for me to see like what the expectations were for some of these teams that actually made the field last year. And I hope it stays that way because it makes it exciting as we're trying to figure out the last couple of games.
No, it's like making the Sweet 16, man.
Yeah.
St. Peter's didn't have to win the national championship. It's like you make the Sweet 16.
I won $900 off that team. I love St. Peter's.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
When they beat Kentucky? Yeah. It's like the biggest bet I ever won.
Oh my God. All right, so everybody go put a nickel on our dark horses and see what you think. The hard thing, and you said this, there will be playoff odds out before the start of the season. They're not out now. So you zeroed in on, let's base this off win total projections rather than trying to be like, you've got to pick a team that's more than 500,000 to 1 to win the national title, because nobody is sitting here and saying like, I think West Virginia could win it all. Like that is not the conversation we're trying to have. We're trying to talk about, could you win 10 games, upset somebody here, a little bit of chaos happens and you get in. So when we have the odds, we'll obviously revisit this again in the preseason. When we have the actual playoff odds and like, where can you maybe really find some value on who the next Indiana, SMU, or Arizona State could be?
Yeah, I want to say that was like very close to the season last year that I started to notice those. But yes, when they come out, we'll definitely dive in on them.